Hello, hello. Gonna do a little reading. Uh, Chapter 7, connecting empath- empathically. Let's go for that. All right, so they give you the scripture, Matthew 7:12. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets, Matthew 7:12. Skill, uh, empathic reflection, purpose to build relationships with counselees so that they feel heard holistically and better understand their own situation. Formula, you feel blank, feeling word, because blank, context. Think back to a specific situation in your life when you were in deep emotional pain and someone attempted to be helpful but instead made things worse. What did this individual do or not do that added to your distress? What did you need from this person instead? Write down your response. I guess my guess would be it could be along the lines of someone not understanding you, but being extremely confident that they do understand you, and then giving you input on something that you don't even believe is a situation. They could bulldoze you of some sort. Maybe write down your response next. Now reflect on a time when the result was the opposite. You were in agony, and the person with you was helpful in some way. What in particular helped you to feel well cared for? Sometimes it's just a good listener. Sometimes it's just someone that just hears out everything that you say. You feel like they're paying attention. You feel even better, extra credit if they actually understand what you're saying and you feel that they understand. Those are good feelings. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes that helps a bunch. Whether they have advice or not, sometimes it's nice just to be heard, or to sometimes you need to hear yourself saying it out loud. So if you're not talking to yourself in the car and talking it out to yourself in the car, or when you're on a walk or something like that, to have someone that you're able to share with and they just listen well. It seems like they're paying attention and that they're understanding, picking up what you're putting down. That helps. Page 126. Chances are that in the first scenario, you did not feel heard or understood. There you go. The individual may not have taken the time and energy required to really listen. Or perhaps this person offered quick solutions by giving advice, quoting a Bible verse, or simply switching the conversation to their own issues or something else. By contrast, in the second scenario, you likely felt emotionally connected to the person at that moment, sensing that they understood what you were going through, or at least that they were making a concerted effort to understand and be with you in your pain. This kind of emotional presence, or being with, quote unquote, being with another person, is empathy. As Matthew 7:12, the so-called golden rule, reminds us, we not only like to be treated well by others, but also we are commanded to treat others the way we would like to be treated. So if we like it when others empathize with us, God calls us to treat others em- empathically. Empathically. I guess that's how you say it. This chapter focuses on how to get better at doing this. What is empathy? When Heather's the author here on this portion, there's a couple authors in this book. When Heather was an MA student in counseling, I had an experience that profoundly affected me as a counselor. The professor in my skills course asked for a volunteer to role play a counselee for a class demonstration on empathic reflection. A friend's difficult situation had been on my mind, so I decided that I could role play her situation and agreed to be the counselee. What astounded me is the depth of emotion I began to experience despite my nervousness at being in front of the class as the professor skillfully used empathic reflection. I actually began to cry, and this wasn't even my own personal problem! Exclamation point. As I went back to my seat, I told my classmates that I was role playing someone else, and they couldn't believe it either. They were like, sure, sure. From that time onward, I was fully convinced of the power of empathy. This has not only benefited my counselees, but has greatly affected the priority I give to empathy training in my teaching. Carl Rogers, 1957 to slash 1992, one of the grandparents of contemporary counseling, defined empathy as the ability, quote, to sense the client's private world as if it were your own, but without ever losing the as if quality, end quote. Page 829, I guess, in his book. Rogers goes on to explain that this concept means that you, as the counselor, can, quote, sense the client's anger, fear, or confusion as if it were your own, yet without your own anger, fear, or confusion getting bound up in it. Page 829. Empathy enables counselors to step into the counselee's space without bias or imposition while still connecting to their counselee's thoughts, feelings, and experiences in an authentic way. The first part of Rogers's definition, that is, the ability to identify with someone's experience, is similar to the expression walking in another's shoes. This does not mean that you should try to imagine how you would feel in a similar situation, which is the tendency of most people, but rather that you attempt to understand how your counselee would feel in that situation, given their genetic makeup, personality, family background, and other life experiences. Here's a little thing. It says listening, the hardest or simplest thing to do. Benner, Benner, in 2015 compares therapeutic listening to what some spiritual directors describe as listening with one ear to the directee, counselee, and one ear to the spirit. Page 187. Similarly, we need to think carefully, quote, about how a therapist actually does this in the midst of all the other things to which we need to attend. Our own thoughts, our associations to our thoughts, as well as to the unconscious elements of our interaction. Hello, Brenda. This is all, to me, it's all people helping stuff. This is people helping stuff. Are we good listeners, and are we empathetic? Do we have empathy in dealing with others? As unconscious elements of our interaction, the words and nonverbal communications of the counselee, and the movement of the Spirit of God within our spirit, end quote. Therapeutic listening is not, therefore, a simple matter. Quote, I judge it to be the hardest and yet at the same time most important part of the therapist's contribution to psychotherapeutic process, page 187. All right, Brené Brown, 2012, describes empathy as, quote, the real antidote to shame, end quote, page 94, and as a, quote, strange and powerful thing, end quote. Quote, there is no script. There is no right or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredible healing message of you are not alone. Page 81. On one hand, hard. On the other, simple. Which is it? What does appear to be common across all skilled people helpers is that listening is of crucial importance. So, how often do we think, hey, am I a good listener? How good am I at listening? And is there any way I can improve to be a better listener, to show empathy, to help people in a sense of empathy? All right. Kind of like you're trying to put yourself in their shoes, feel their emotions, yet not be destroyed by the circumstance. So you can you can ask good questions or whatnot. This is an essential distinction and bears repeating. Imagining how you would feel in a particular situation may come close to how your counselee feels, but it also might lead you in the wrong direction. While self disclosure is an important counseling skill, see chapter 12, it is often overused and misused. The goal of empathy is to understand how the person who you are with, feels in the situation, not how you would feel. It's not about you. So you're trying to see and understand how they feel about the certain situation. An example is the emotion of shame. I, Heather, know that I know what it is like to feel shame because I have experienced situations in which I have felt humiliated or embarrassed, or have behaved in ways that I would rather no one else ever finds out about. Now consider an Asian counselee who describes feeling intense shame because he placed second instead of first in his class at school. I've never felt shame in this situation. Rather, I might feel overjoyed at doing so well. Maybe you're underachiever, just kidding. Or perhaps some mild disappointment that I just missed the top honor. As a counselor who was raised in the West, what I must do is relate to his experience by imagining how he feels in that situation, given his culture, family background, and personality, rather than projecting how I might feel onto him. While sensing and describing what counselees are going through is of utmost importance in counseling, over identification can potentially be destructive. If you get lost in your counselee's overwhelming feelings, you lose objectivity. It risks becoming about you, not them. When your feelings begin to interfere with your ability to intervene in ways that could help them move forward in their journey, you are at risk for burnout or compassion fatigue. You cannot feel what your counselee feels. You cannot feel what your counselee feel, but you can use your own experience with personal emotions to better understand what they feel as unique individuals in unique circumstances. The next little section there is Christian foundations of empathy. There are countless examples of how Jesus models for us this concept of empathy in his interactions with others. For instance, the Samaritan woman at the well was amazed that Jesus understood both her illicit sexual behavior as well as her yearnings for greater meaning in her life. John 4:4-26. Jesus also clearly understood the rich young ruler's dilemma of being torn between serving him and having to give up his wealth. Mark 10:17-22. Another example is Jesus' perceptive understanding of the motivation behind the apparently senseless act of the woman who anointed his feet with costly perfumes and wiped them with her hair. Luke 7:37-39. Here's a little let me read this. Not only does Jesus demonstrate empathy and how he relates to people, but in his unique position of being both God and human, he can empathize both with God the Father and with us. In this sense, he could be seen as the ultimate empathizer. Isaiah prophesied about Jesus, stating, and we got this Isaiah 53:3-5. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. ... Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. That's at Isaiah 53:3-5. Describing Jesus, Paul says, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Philippians 2:6-7. Paul eloquently describes Christ's ability to walk in the shoes of people without losing his sense of self as fully God and fully man. In a similar way, the writer of Hebrews expresses Jesus' unique ability to empathize and feel with people by stating, quote, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." Hebrews 4:15. So here, biblical/theological connections. It says, in theological language, empathy is best illustrated by the incarnation. Mr. Benner says in 1983, though created in God's image, we are unlike God in so many ways. God chose to bridge the distance between his total otherness and our humanity by putting himself into human form, flesh and blood, so that he would comprehend the cognitive and emotional dimensions of human experience. Philippians 2:6-8. Because of the gift of his Son to us, we can know and experience God's love, care, and blessing. The rich theological language and literature exploring the incarnation model for us the central therapeutic value of empathy we love because he first loved us. 1 John 4:19. Benner suggests that this desire and ability to purge others of their badness by taking the evil into themselves is a possible interpretation of the Imago Dei in each person. The incarnation as a model for counseling suggests that therapists are able to absorb sickness and suffering and therefore transform the counselee's inner world. Hello, there we go, Aunt Jane. How you doing, Aunt Jane and Sister Catherine? Good morning, 11:29 here in Gentilly, New Orleans. It says, throughout Scripture, we see the concept of empathy being explained, instructed, and modeled. Integral to the Christian experience and growth process is the need to both give and receive empathy from each other and from God himself. Paul, in Romans 12:15, expresses succinctly what it means to reflect empathically when he says, quote, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn," end quote. Again, this imperative is not that we must fully live out the same experience as one another, but instead it calls us to connect with and share in the experiences of another. It is the feeling with that is so vitally important to human relationship and connection. Last paragraph of this section. Additionally, Proverbs 18:13 speaks to the importance of listening well before responding, stating, quote, "To answer before listening, that is folly and shame," end quote. Is that Proverbs 18:13? In other words, it is disrespectful and even absurd for a counselor or people helper to talk before taking the time to find out what the counselee is really trying to say. True empathy is not about proving that you are a good listener. Instead, it is the act of communing with the counselee. And that can only be done after the counselor has listened well and truly heard the counselee's story. Doing good. How are you? And oh, there you go. And Brenda says, "How are you doing?" Miss Catherine, that's right. And Brenda and I were at church last night. Prayed for you, Aunt Jane, and Sister Catherine. Amen. This thing, it says empirical support. The pro-social benefits of empathy are multiple and supported by extensive research. For instance, empathy reduces prejudice and racism, increases altruism, in parentheses, helpful even if it goes against one's self-interest, close parentheses. Number three, third bullet is good for marriage. It deepens intimacy, increases relationship satisfaction, and helps resolve conflicts. Bullet number 4, decreases bullying and aggressiveness. Number 5, promotes heroic acts. Number 6, counters inequality, and inequality can reduce empathy. Example, people show less empathy when they attain higher socioeconomic status. The next one is good for business. The next one is good for healthcare. Adapted from the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley. What is empathy? Okay, next section, we are in cognitive and effective empathy. All right, sounds good. It says there are two components of empathy, the cognitive and the affective. With the cognitive aspect, you as the counselor can cognitively or intellectually understand the counselee's emotion and the cause or content of that emotion. As its name implies, cognitive empathy stays in your head and is a mental acknowledgement of the counselee's situation. Conversely, affective empathy involves an emotional response or connection to the counselee's affect. In cognitive empathy, you are primarily using your mental capacities to figure out what a counselee is experiencing. This could involve, for example, going through a mental checklist of feeling words to see which one might best fit, crafting a succinct yet descriptive summary of content, and then reflecting back the feelings and content you have decided would be the most helpful. During this process, the counselor can feel somewhat disconnected emotionally from the counselee. This is particularly noticeable when you are learning the skill and it seems artificial. However, the ability to come up with the best feeling word for the situation, paired with an accurate and focused content reflection, is an enormously helpful skill. It is the cognitive component of empathy that is the primary skill focus of this chapter. This skill will involve using your intellectual perception skills and reflection skills to demonstrate your understanding of what the counselee has said. Empathy that is only felt or understood internally by the counselor and not expressed in some way is not empathy in the eyes of the counselee. In contrast to cognitive empathy, in affective empathy, the counselor's emotions are engaged and you, as the counselor, feel with the counselee. Affective empathy is a unique skill in that it is the first that we have discussed so far that asks the counselor to actually become someone different, not simply do something different. Another way of saying this is that this skill is not just about a counselor's external behavior toward a counselee, but requires the counselor to shift internally. As mentioned earlier, a good counselor should be able to step into someone else's experience and rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn, Romans 12:15. This goes beyond just learning the right way to say cognitive empathy by cultivating within the counselor the ability to be connected with the feelings and experiences of another human being. The challenge is to do this without losing your sense of self so that you can maintain enough objectivity and presence of mind to allow you to also use cognitive empathy. So empathy, understanding what people are saying, you're being a good listener, you're understanding what they're saying, and you're trying your best to recognize the feelings of your person that you're trying to help, that you like try your best to feel them, kind of like suffer with them in their telling of their story. All right, losing your sense of self happens when you listen to a counselee's story and check mark number one, feel as if you've lived through it yourself. Check mark two, feel a need to rescue, fix, or erase the counselee's problem because it's too difficult for you to hear. And thirdly, cannot identify how your feelings, thoughts, and perspectives differ from those of the counselees. Yeah, so you're not trying to inflect, you're not trying to infer, you're not trying to put, how I would feel. I would feel like this, blah blah blah. So much. The first part and the early parts is you trying to truly understand their feelings and their perception of whatever they just went through, whatever they went through, whenever they did. All right. Let's see. To read this part, it is easier to learn cognitive empathy than it is to learn affective empathy. This is because affective empathy is to some degree intuitive. As long as there is even a tiny seed of such intuition, affective empathy can be developed and can grow over time with attention and experience. So, we encourage you to begin with cognitive empathy while nurturing your ability to connect emotionally with your counselees so that you can give them the gift of your authentic presence without losing your sense of self. In the last paragraph of this section, of course, let me get a sip. Of course, for empathy to be done correctly and fully, it must be both part of the counselor's being and part of his doing. A good counselor has the ability to both cognitively and effectively empathize, but each counselor's use of and comfort with both aspects of empathy will differ based on her own personality and approach to counseling. For example, if you are naturally more of an effectively empathic person, developing your empathy skills will be more about putting words to your affective experience of another person and learning to keep your emotional response in the realm of empathy without overstepping into sympathy, which we will talk more about shortly. If you are more of a cognitively empathic person, your process will likely involve working on being more present in the moment with a counselee and experiencing the story she has to tell. And for some of you, both components of empathy will be a challenge. So start with developing cognitive empathy and grow from there. The next section is learning the skill of empathic reflection. So, this reflection stuff is like a reflection is, you're telling me a story, and so I kind of repeat it back to you to let you know I'm understanding what you're saying, or potentially correct me if I'm wrong, right? So if you're like, my junior year in high school where I was cut from the team, it was devastating to me, and I had a hard time doing well and focusing on school because I was so bothered that I was not on the team that season. You could say, okay, reflecting would be like, what I hear you saying is that it was extremely hard for you to cope with being cut from the team that junior year of high school. It's kind of saying it as close as possible to the way they said it so they can correct you if it needs be. If there is no need for correction, then what it does, it helps them to feel that you are over the target. You're understanding what your counselee or your person you're trying to help is saying. And that's like a very important first step in helping someone. Learning the skill of empathic reflection. We now look at how to combine the skills of reflecting content and reflecting feeling into a compound skill that results in an ability to connect with counselees through empathic reflection. This is the linchpin skill of effective counseling. The ability to link together the what and why of the counselee's feelings is paramount. Turns page. Page 132 says, in keeping with the skills we have learned thus far, basic level empathy is expressed as an interchangeable response or a reflection. As a reflection, there is no additive interpretation at this time. You are simply being the verbal mirror. So, see, so I do have a problem with this, okay? They don't, basically, what they should be saying, in my opinion, you should not try to overly interpret, um, or diagnose or something like that. But just say overly interpret, because here they try to say, oh, well, it's not, we don't want you to interpret. Well, and they talk about mirroring, being a mirror. Well, look, if I look in a mirror, I'm seeing exactly what I am. If someone is mirroring what someone else is saying, then you better say it exactly how they said it, word for word. If you don't say it word for word, then you are using some type of interpretive liberty to take out or replace or add words to what they're saying. So I don't like how this is worded. I don't like it. It doesn't make sense to me, but hey, whatever. They're probably smarter than me, and I'm just a beginner. Okay. Additive interpretation at this time. You're simply being the verbal mirror. If I'm a verbal mirror, I need to nail exactly what they said, word for word, verbatim. If not, I'm doing some type of interpretation. Whether they like to say so or not. You're simply being the verbal mirror for what the counselee has provided in the conversation. Intuitive or additive empathy will be introduced in Chapter 9. The purpose of expressing empathy is to enable counselees to feel heard holistically, in that both the facts and the feelings of their story are accurately reflected back to them. Connecting through empathy is seen as the primary connecting skills in the counseling process. It connects counselor to counselee while simultaneously connecting the counselee's own thoughts and feelings. The levels of empathy. This new skill of empathy requires the counselor to truly begin integrating all previously learned skills, from attending to perceiving to reflection. To begin with, the counselor must attend to both the verbal and the nonverbal messages of counselees, as well as their context. As you listen to counselees, you are striving to set aside your own biases and judgments in order to hear their perspective and to listen for the core messages of what they are communicating. A helpful, empathic response will increase rapport. It will also enable counselees to remain focused on their issues while simultaneously developing and clarifying important parts of their story. So I kind of get it, but I don't like the way it's worded. Here's the empathy scale. Level 1, this response is hurtful to the therapeutic relationship, as it directly or indirectly tells the counselee that the counselor is not listening, does not respect the counselee, or does not understand the counselee. The counselor's reflection could be any of the following. Number 1, ignores or dismisses the counselee's emotion. Example, changes the subject. Yeah, I can't stand when people do that. It's like, look, when someone's speaking, give them the floor. When someone's speaking, give them the floor and give them your attention. That's kindness. That's respect. Contradicts the counselee's emotion. That's not good. Condescends, as if from a superior to an inferior. Is argumentative. States or infers that the counselee is deficient for feeling the way that he does. Example, stupid, ignorant, foolish, or childish. Gives advice, shifts the focus onto what the counselor finds. So they're kind of against giving advice. They kind of want you to go on an exploration and a journey. It's almost like they want you to ask questions to lead breadcrumbs for these people to get where you want them to be, without straight up telling them where you want them to be, is what they do the majority of the time, it seems. So that's why I say don't give advice. You can give questions, and you can ask questions that can make them think through things and have them kind to arrive at their own conclusions, when really you kind of led them down that path. Okay. Shifts the focus onto what the counselor finds interesting or important, rather than what the counselee has expressed. Yeah, That's not. It's like a bulldozer tactic. Completely misinterprets the counselee's emotion. Example, stating that the counselee feels happy about something when she's actually feeling scared. Yeah, that was rough last week in my one of my role plays, and I was sharing one of my problems, and the guy completely misinterpreted what I was saying and how I felt, and he was like completely wrong. There wasn't even any way to, um, no way to save it. I was just like, no, that's not how I feel at all. Um, a different skill is used, but so inappropriately that empathy is virtually absent. All right, so that's level one. Level two, the empathic response in some way misses the mark of what the counselee has communicated, but is not as harmful as level one. Specifically, the response could be any of the following. Check mark number one, notably detracts from or minimizes the counselee's emotion, but still reflects a feeling within the same broad category of emotion. Check mark number two is stated as a question, not a statement. Check mark number three is accurate regarding something the counselee said previously in the conversation, but is quote unquote behind the counselee's current point in his story and not lining up well. And then the last check mark, a response in which the goal is not empathic reflection, but an appropriately used difference skill. Level 2.5 in this category of empathic reflection, the response is missing something. The counselor's reflection could be the following quote, check mark, is accurate as it pertains to the feeling reflected, but lacks adequate content reflection. While intended to be an empathic reflection, it in essence is only reflecting feeling. It qualitatively communicates empathy to the counselee due to its accuracy or delivery, but lacks attention to context. Slightly misses the mark of what the counselee has communicated. Level three. At this level, an empathic response accurately reflects the counselee's feelings and content without adding to or subtracting from what she has communicated. The counselor's reflection could be any of the following quote, not quote, check mark. It, number one, is fully reciprocal or interchangeable with the counselor's explicit statement. Check mark number two is an accurate depiction of the counselor's situation and or state of being. Check mark number three does not go deeper than the counselor's expressed feelings. Check mark number four does not minimize or negate the counselor's expressed feelings. Level 4 and 5. At these levels, the empathic response goes beyond what the counselee has stated and is beyond the scope of this chapter. We will cover this more in chapter 9. So, for the time being, limit your reflections to a level 3 and stay with the feelings and content that the counselee has communicated. All right. Here it says, as a more integrated skill, empathy can be communicated on various levels. In this chapter, we will explore levels 1 through 3, while chapter 9 will explore levels 4 and 5. The goal with empathy is not necessarily to always use the highest level available, but instead to use the level that is most suitable for a particular counselee in his or her current situation. Within this chapter, you are striving for a level 3 empathic response. While empathic reflection is an essential skill that should be frequently used throughout the counseling process, the other skills in this book are also important. There will, therefore, be times when conveying empathy is not your primary goal because you are more focused on skill, such as clarifying or confronting. However, it is vital that you are aware of how empathy levels are affected, even when showing empathy is not your primary purpose at that moment. For this reason, we believe that any counselor response can and should be related on the empathy scale. Last paragraph. In most counseling situations, a level 3 response is your, quote, home base, end quote, for the counseling process, as it provides a safe and effective way for counselees to feel heard and for counselors to confirm their understanding of their counselees' stories. From this point forward, regardless of the skills, you add to your, quote, technique toolbox. A level 3 empathic reflection is the best skill to use when you do not know what to do. How empathy is verbally expressed. In an empathic statement, there are two parts: and feeling, and the content drawing on the skills you learned in chapters 5 and 6. You are now looking to link those two concepts. Instead of simply reflecting the facts or content, chapter 5, or reflecting the emotion, chapter 6, we are now attempting to draw some connections and communicate an understanding that a certain feeling has arisen in light of or because of a specific fact or piece of content. The formula for a level 3 empathic reflection is, quote, you feel blank, feeling word, unhappy, because blank, you were fired. Content. All right. Here's a diagnostic implications. I got about 7 minutes and then I got to go, maybe 6. All right. Diagnostic implications. In the history of psychopathology, alexithymia is the psychiatric concept used to describe people who are devoid of empathic skills. Specifically, they checkmark have difficulty identifying feelings in themselves and others. Checkmark number 2, struggle to distinguish between their own feelings and bodily sensations, such as emotional arousal. That's crazy. Checkmark number 3, have difficulty describing their feelings to other people. Checkmark number 4, have limited ability to imagine things and therefore have few fantasies. And checkmark number 5, are responsible to external stimuli and cognitively process the external world with little reference to their internal world. While not a DSM diagnosis, it plays a significant role in autism spectrum disorders, some personality disorders, conduct disorder, and substance abuse. And of course, it wreaks havoc in marital and family relationships. The capacity for empathy is a significant correlate of mental and relational health. Makes sense. Empathy is often used simply to track with or follow the counselee. In this case, empathy serves to say, I hear that you feel a particular way because of this particular situation. Excuse me, no more, no less. An example of this in its simplest form might look like the following dialogue with a 25-year-old male counselee. I'm really disappointed with myself. It's Friday evening and I'm behind in my responsibilities for work. That means I had to bring files home with me tonight and will spend most of Saturday finishing up all the things I'd want to do in the office during the week. And you could just say, what? Yes, life sucks. Life doesn't. No, I'm just kidding. Counselor, you feel disappointed because you're bringing work home this weekend. I don't like that. That's very simplistic. The guy put out more, and you're trying to sum it up in such a small point. I don't like that. In this scenario, disappointed is the feeling, and bringing work home is the content. The counselee clearly stated his own emotion and then proceeded to provide content. You, as the counselor, simply condensed his statement and reflected it back more concisely. In so doing, you were able to show that you heard both the feeling and the content of the counselee's message. I think you got to be careful simplifying something so fast, so little, taking something so much to so little. That can be disrespectful, in my opinion. And the content of the counselee's message, thus expressing empathic understanding. In putting together the above response, think back to chapters 4 and 5 in regard to reflecting content and reflecting feeling. Notice that an empathic reflection is simply a compound sentence where you are joining two previously learned reflection skills. Reflecting content, you had to bring work home this weekend. Reflecting feeling, you feel disappointed. At other times, empathy. I got to wrap it up there. All right, yo, it was fun. Thank you so much. Aunt Jane, God bless you. Aunt Brenda, God bless you. Thanks for hopping on. God bless you. It was fun. Thanks for letting me read, and thanks for saying hello and sharing the time with me. So I got to go have a meeting in 2 minutes, right down a couple doors down, so I'm good. Love you guys. God bless you. I do, Lord. Bless everybody on the call. Bless everybody that hopped on. Everybody, Lord, everybody's family. Lift up all our visitors, all our members of our church, Lord. Bless them all. In Christ's name, amen. All right. Catch you later. 11:58 Central Time. Peace.